My name is Joel. I'm a pothead and alcoholic.
Hi, Joel.
Welcome to the second biennial Arizona Secular AA Conference. We did this 2 years. How many of you were here 2 years ago when we did it? Boy, look at all the new faces. That's awesome. That's really awesome. I'd like to start with a couple of announcements. First of all, the restrooms, which is really important. You go out the door, and to the left are the restrooms. You'll see a big sign that says restrooms. Second of all, please silence your cell phones. If you have not done so already. And there is no smoking anywhere in this building. I'm assuming there is a smoking area outside somewhere. And also, if for any reason we hear alarms and bells going off and there's some sort of an emergency, there are emergency exits on this floor. You look for the exit signs, but there's a fire exit out and all the way to the right, or you can go up the stairs and out the front door. If for any reason we do have to evacuate the room, we should all meet on a little plaza in front of the front doors so we can take attendance and make sure that everybody's attentive. To start with, I'm going to, unless anybody here wants to read the AA preamble?
Yeah, sure.
Come on up.
I'm sorry, I'm an alcoholic addict. AA preamble. Alcoholics are the fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strengthen, hope with each other to solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversies, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Art. Anybody want to read the We Agnostics preamble? She raised her hand first.
Hi, Catherine, recovered alcoholic. We Agnostics preamble. We Agnostic meetings endeavor to maintain a tradition of free expression and conduct a meeting where alcoholics may feel free to express any doubts or disbeliefs they may have and to share their own personal form of spiritual experience, their search for it, or their rejection of it. In keeping with AA tradition, we do not endorse or oppose any form of religion or atheism. Our only wish is to ensure suffering alcoholics that they can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's beliefs or having to deny their own.
Thank you. All right, the first item on to this morning's agenda is we're going to have a little talk from Joe C. Joe, as most of you know, is the author of Beyond Belief. He's the co-founder of Canada's first secular AA group and the host of the podcast Rebellion Dogs Radio. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joe C.
Later I'll probably stand up and wave my arms around and that, but can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Joe, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Joe.
You know, it's good to see some of my old friends. My home group thinks I'm double dating on you, Arizona. You know, I just told them, it's a different area code. But it's great to be back, and I'm so proud of what the committee's been doing here and what the community has been doing here. And you know, there's bumps along the way, and I know a few things about putting on a conference, and I know that it's a labor of love, and there's personality clashes, and there's hurdles to overcome and that sort of thing. But in the end of the day, if everyone walks away meeting having someone they got to know a little bit better, great. I've got two jobs. Job one, which is this I'm going to try to condense this to get us closer on time, is to talk a little bit about what's going on in Toronto, the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's mostly a good news story of how AA self-corrects. And it isn't a new happening. AA is always self-corrected. And then later on, depending if we're back on time, I'll tell you a little bit more about me, Josie, the alcoholic. And just to keep you up to speed, Toronto became newsworthy because the Toronto Intergroup office, after the agnostic groups went from one group to two groups, and then the first group, starting a second night, brought a motion to delist the agnostic groups for not being AA enough for the Toronto standards. And that was, a horrible time in my life personally. You see, I got sober during disco, so I will admit everything. And so I was young, and as a young person, there's a certain amount of rolling the eyes, and I got in trouble for wearing a hat in a meeting, because we don't do that in a AA gathering, my hair length and, my colorful vocabulary. I mean, there were a lot of things that I was used to being seen as an outsider. We started a young people's meeting, and rah, rah, rah. And, we thought, do we have to give up all three of sex, drugs, and rock and roll? That's kind of the sort of young people's motif. And, so I was used to being kind of an outlier, oh, Joe, he's so whatever, right? Always pushing the envelope. And so this wasn't new that, this was ruffling a few feathers. And, but it shocked me, and it hurt me, and it broke my heart when I'd grown up in AA since the time I was 14. I was part of AA. I was sober since I was 16. And, and I was told, you are no longer welcome here. Your kind is not welcome in Toronto AA. And I was beside myself. And because that wasn't the AA I knew, and I'll talk about that more later this afternoon, the sort of very liberal environment of AA I grew up in Montreal, Quebec in the mid-70s. So they voted to delist us, and I couldn't believe that. And so what now? Well, for starters, it didn't end the group. The group met Thursday at 6 o'clock, just like it did the week before. And it carried on. And there were a few weird things that come from unintended consequences. And that was that it wasn't a decision that was quietly made in an intergroup church basement to take out these rogue groups. It became a front page news. And so people of Toronto, Toronto's got over 200 groups that meet 600 times a week. Thank you. And they, and a typical Toronto intergroup meeting has 25 to 40 people there, right? So it's not exactly the voice of AA. So people voted with their feet. They came to support our meeting regardless of what they believed. They started their own agnostic meetings. There are 13 meetings in the Greater Toronto area. There used to be 2. And we're back in the list. I'll tell you more about that journey later. And the Area 80 that Toronto was part of, we never they never blinked at our district meetings. The district groups didn't care what we said or did or thought or believed in our meetings, just who is going to put on the institution meetings, who's going to do public information work. Yeah, we don't care what you think, what you believe, what you say, we care what you do. And, so that was sort of the two AAs. But I just want to, I've only got a couple minutes in this little episode, and I want to share with you something from a pamphlet called AA Traditions, How It Developed by Bill W. And this sort of tells you the story that this isn't a new problem, and we haven't solved the problem. But here's how it goes. The way our worthy alcoholics have sometimes tried to judge the less worthy is, as we look back on it, rather comical. Imagine, if you can, one alcoholic judging another. At one time or another, most AA groups go on rule-making benders. Naturally enough, too, as a group commences to grow rapidly, it is confronted with many alarming problems. Panhandlers begin to panhandle. Members get drunk and sometimes get other members drunk. Those with mental difficulties throw depressions or break into paranoid denunciations of fellow members. Gossips, and righteously denounce the local wolves in Red Riding Hoods. Newcomers argue that they aren't alcoholic at all, but keep coming around anyway. Slippers trade on the fair name of AA in order to get themselves jobs. Others refuse to accept all the 12 steps of the recovery program. Some go so far as to say the God business is bunk and quite unnecessary. Under these conditions, our conservative program-abiding members get scared. These appalling conditions must be controlled, they think, else AA will surely go to rack and ruin. This view they view with alarm for the good of the AA movement. At this point, the group enters the rule and regulations phase. Charters, bylaws, and membership rules are excitedly passed, and authority is granted committees to filter out undesirables and discipline the evildoers. Then the group elders, now clothed with authority, commence to get busy. Recalcitrants are cast into outer darkness, respectable busybodies who throw stones at the sinners. As for the so-called sinners, they either insist on staying around, or else they form new groups of their own. Or maybe they join a more congenial and less intolerant crowd in their neighborhood. The elders soon discover that the rules and regulations aren't working very well. Most attempts at enforcement generate such waves of dissension and intolerance in the group that this condition is presently recognized to be worse for the group's life than the very worst that the worst ever did. After time, fear and intolerance subsides. The group survived unscathed. Everybody has learned a great deal. So it is that few of us are any longer afraid of what any newcomer can do to our AA reputation or effectiveness. Those who slip, those who panhandle, scandalize, those with mental twists, those who rebel against our program, those who trade on the AA reputation, all such persons seldom harm an AA group for long. Some of these have become our most respected and best loved. Some have remained to try our patience, sober nevertheless. Others have drifted away. We have begun to regard there is no menace, but rather just teachers. They oblige us to cultivate patience, tolerance, and humility. We finally see that they are only people sicker than the rest of us, that we who condemn them are the Pharisees, whose false righteousness does our group the deeper spiritual damage. 1946. Bill Wilson.